Hey, y'all, welcome back to a Tuesday, August 6th. Sports Guys today to talk, you guessed it, all things Tennessee Vols. On today's program, we talk about the James Pearce Jr. sack totals. What's most realistic? Could he catch Derek Barnett? Could he catch Reggie White? Where does his final Vol sack total ultimately end up? How much of the college football playoff aspect is involved here in terms of what Pierce can get to, what the rest of the defensive line room looks like as a whole right now. We look at the Vols losing Jourdan Thomas for the season over the weekend at the star spot. Does this mean it's Boo Carter's opportunity as a true freshman, and what that means for Tim Banks and the Vols defense as well? We talk about the cornerback room and what that looks like going into 2024, headlined by Jamad McCoy and Ricky Gibson at the two corner spots. And then we also wrap up here with some Dylan Dreiling season review with the 2024 national champion Tennessee baseball team, and what Dreiling meant to the program and why he was probably the most underrated Vol baseball player all season long. So all that and more coming up next with Rocky Top Insiders Ryan Schumpert and Omaha Productions Jack Foster. Don't forget, folks, before we dive into today's episode, just a little bit of housekeeping. Before we jump into it, don't forget, folks, you can check out this show on YouTube, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. Like and subscribe if you have not already done so. Well over 2,000 subs on the YouTube channel, so appreciate that support on the video front. And if you prefer to watch this program, you can easily do so. Clips, shorts, full episodes, all that good stuff over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. You can listen to us every day on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you get your podcasts. And if you're you have not already done so, please make sure that you leave this show a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. Check out the homepage, chasethomaspodcast.com, for information about what we've got going on here on the podcast front and all that good stuff. And email us if you want to get in touch with the show at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. Keep up with us on the socials, Pod Chase Thomas on Twitter, facebook.com/Chase Thomas Writer on Facebook, and Chase Thomas Podcast on Instagram. So there you go. All kinds of great ways to keep up with the show and get involved and interact with us and everything we got cooking here on the daily here on the Chase Thomas Podcast. All right, Uncle Darren.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Over there in Knoxville, Tennessee, Rocky Top Insiders' own Ryan Schumpert is here, the sportsman himself. Ryan Schumpert, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back on here. Glad to it's already divulged into a little bit of chaos before the recording started, so I'm sure we'll be in for a nice chaotic podcast, which are always the most fun.
You know what? This is why when we don't have Ethan Stone of Saturday Down South on here, who's just the nicest guy. Like, Ethan's not going to partake in this level of madness. He's going to defend me. He's just going to laugh. He's not going to egg it on, but we're also just kind of concerned about Ethan. He's in parts unknown. I don't know the internet situation where he is, like how close he is to the Smokies. Like he's out there in the elements. So every day for Ethan Stone, he's Davy Crocking it over there in Heritage. So let's just keep Ethan Stone your thoughts every day as he continues to make it happen out there in the outskirts of Knoxville, Tennessee. Also here of Omaha Productions, Jack Foster. Jack, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I excited for this pod. I saw the rundown like an hour beforehand, and we have another very absurd Chase question on the rundown, so I'm excited to get to that. It is going to be a very, very entertaining 60 minutes.
I've never posed an absurd question on this podcast.
You did last week, and you're doing it again tonight, so I beg to differ.
Chase, I want you to know that, and I won't out them, I had someone who I didn't know was a regular listener to pod, maybe isn't a regular listener to pod, bring it up to me and be like, that Arkansas thing was ridiculous. I was listening to the pod.
All knower.
The Arkansas thing was insane that he was talking about it that way.
I cannot wait to be vindicated because I'm so adamantly opposed to the NC State argument, and I'm dying on the Arkansas is a tougher game and road SEC game. We're not going to relitigate this.
Okay, maybe Kentucky, I'd hear you out, which is what I brought up last week. But NC
Arkansas is a
State
better
is
team than Kentucky.
No,
Kentucky,
I disagree,
the ship's sinking. The ship is sinking
that's not my
in
point.
Lexington.
I'm saying is it is otherworldly absurd that you think it's even close between Arkansas and NC State.
I won't take this. I won't take this level of abuse. It's a fair question. And winning on the road, Heupel's 4-4 on the road in the SEC the last 2 years.
Yeah, he doesn't play Arkansas every year.
Doesn't matter. Arkansas and
Second
Tennessee
worst
has some
team in the
history.
SEC.
Arkansas's got juice.
No,
Arkansas does not have juice.
I'm sorry.
They have negative juice. They ran out of juice last year.
I thought this is America. No. I'm not allowing this. It was a fair question. I'm not getting bullied on my own podcast over the Arkansas take. And this gaslighting of like, there's a listener of the pod who came to me out of the blue. This unnamed source that you're not even going to throw out there because you just don't want to say, you know, my brother didn't like it. Or my brother was just like, what was happening here? Or even just Ryan himself. Or maybe it's Ethan who posed it to you after, and Ethan's not here to...
I told Jack can, and I'll tell you after we record, Jack can vouch, who it was no one I'm related to that came to me with and let me know that he couldn't believe this.
But if I didn't know who it was, and Ryan actually did like go up to his roommate or tell his brother, hey, listen, go to this time code in the podcast and tell me what you think, and then come back and say, look, there's this guy... I would love that move, but that's not what happened. It is legit. I'm sorry, Chase.
It's fine. This is no worse than the bullying we had before we got started here, where Ryan was horrified at just the nature of a struggling mid-30s bald man. Like Ryan, just no sympathy on this very program. But, you know, hey, that's Ryan Schumpert for you of Rocky Top Insider, for all my bald listeners. Goodness gracious.
I'm a friend of the bald community.
You're a big Latte Larry's guy.
No one's done more for the bald community than I have.
You know, it's always good when Chase's head is just completely out of the shot. And he is just cowered down, laughing.
I'm not cowered down. It's just the way, so my chair, I put my elbow on the left side of the chair. And when I'm laughing, I just, I lean forward. And it's just off camera. It's just the way the thing works. But goodness gracious. Wow. I will tell you, you're giving me this much heat. I listened to the RTI podcast this week. And you spent, 10 minutes talking about wrestling. And, how much Ryan doesn't like wrestling. And that Rick really likes it, and Jack's like, I don't even really like it. It's not that big of a deal. It's fine. Y'all are gonna do a segment every week trying to guess Jack's action figures, and you're giving me grief about posing a realistic question about Arkansas and why that's a tough SEC road game for Tennessee.
I'm with you, Chase.
Thank you.
Okay, couple things here. One, thank you so much for listening at the 62-minute mark.
Yeah.
What a guy for that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that's straight up entertainment. Just like this is, just like the Arkansas, just like hating you for your Arkansas thing is straight up entertainment. We're entertainers first. That's what we got to do here on these platforms. So I stand by that entire segment. It was not 10 minutes, another thing. What an exaggeration that is. And, dude, the WWE, yes, I am not a fan anymore. Actually, I have nothing against WWE.
Look at this.
Right
Ryan, he's still doing it. It's been 4 days. He still can't make up his mind on this. You don't know what side you want to take. At least Rick is I'm a connoisseur. Rick is over here it's
side with
kind of
Rick
my jam.
before I sided with Ryan. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
It's just unnecessary hate from Ryan. And you, I guess. So both of y'all.
Oof.
You blasted me first. You started.
The hate is necessary. Let's make one thing very clear. The hate for professional wrestling is extremely necessary. My best part of my week last week was someone commented on our podcast on YouTube and said, completely agree with Ryan. This wrestling nonsense is embarrassing. I think was the words. It's embarrassing to watch wrestling as an adult or something like that.
And for those WWE fans that do listen to the RTI Press Pass, it gives them something to look forward to every week with Rick trying to guess my 16 wrestlers in my frame back here. That's fun.
It is fun. That's what we're going to do. Behind you right now, Sting and Batista.
Nah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, look, I'm gonna give you a pass. It's not Sting. It's Jeff Hardy, but it does look like Sting. Yeah.
That was tough.
Jeff Hardy painted his face in the late 2000s. It was kind of his thing, and he was my favorite wrestler. So,
Ryan, I think I know what happened here. Jack's taken a lead role on the RTI podcast, and he's just spent so much time. Like he's gearing up, man. Like Jack is about like he's ready. He's ready for first take. He's gotten a lot of reps in. This is what's happening. You've created a monster on this program, and now we're dealing with the repercussions on both of our shows here, Ryan. I think that's what's happening here with Jack.
You might be onto something. And look, I'll take the blame for us doing the baseball podcast because it's a slow build. A monster is not built overnight, so it was a slow build. And I've been complicit in it from the beginning.
Oh my God. Well, that concludes the Vol Inside Baseball talk here for the Vol podcast. Go listen to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass. And that's the only actual Tennessee Volunteers podcast outside of the Chase Thomas podcast. Many people forget that it's the RTI Press Pass and the Chase Thomas podcast, the only two in the Knoxville market. Pivoting here a little bit, I'm curious which one, Jack. Let's just dive into this because now it's driving me nuts. Which is the question on our rundown here that you said is the absurd question that I'm posing to the group here this week? Which one is it, Jack Foster?
The James Pearce one.
Oh,
that one was ridiculous. Well, I couldn't figure out if you were saying. I couldn't figure out exactly what you were asking. And
he
if
said
it was
all time, it's career.
Yeah, if it's career, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm saying. Ran the numbers. So we got some Pierce stuff coming down the pike here. Here's what I'm throwing. Fact or fiction? James Pearce Jr. breaks the Derek Barnett all-time sack record this season. And I understand. On face value, you're like, okay, this is like a 20 sack season is what James Pearce is going to need to do that because Derek Barnett, 33 all time. Derek Barnett quietly just like double digits it was pretty amazing going back through Derek Barnett. It was just consistent. He didn't have like one crazy year. He was just consistent for 3 years and got to that number. John Henderson had more career sacks than I thought going back through. I'm like, man, defensive tackle over here. Big John, up there in the top 5 all time for sacks for Tennessee. But here's the thing. What's going to help Pearce a lot in getting to this number is he got the majority of those sacks those first years where he's not starting. Like that was still Roman Harrison's spot. He was still splitting reps. He wasn't getting he wasn't getting the number of reps that he was getting that he will get this year. I think part 2 of this is if Tennessee makes the college football playoff and they have a deep run, it's possible because he's going to have more games. Like he might have a season and a half here depending on how Tennessee's season goes. So in terms of Pearce breaking Derek Barnett's all-time sack record, I mean, I don't think he's going to get there, but I think he's going to finish closer than I think a lot of people might have previously anticipated before the start of this year. You're like, there's no way he gets to 33. But in terms of, do I think he gets to 30? I think it's very possible James Pearce gets to 30. And I think at the bare minimum, I'm looking at this year at 15 to 17 sacks is very doable for James Pearce. If they go 13-14, if he plays in 13-14 games, like James Pearce, if you look at the big games and what he was able to do last season, I think he's going to be even better this year. I would buy a lot of James Pearce stock. No Tyler Barron on the opposite side to gobble up sacks too. Like, I don't know. I just think James Pearce is going to be the sack numbers are going to shock some people.
Well, so what are you setting the over-under at for sacks he gets?
I think the over-under should be, I'm going to say like 15.5.
Jeez.
I'm hitting the under pretty
confidently.
Yeah.
In 13 games, you don't think he can get 15.5 sacks in 13 games?
No.
I think it's possible he could maybe get it in just an unbelievable season. If you're telling me that's the over-under, I'm walking to Las Vegas and emptying out my bank account in the casino.
It's a little bit different, yeah, but let's put it this way. So there were Latu Latu had 13 last year at UCLA. Javon Solomon, let me see here. I was pulling up the sack leaders last year. Yeah, Javon Solomon had 16 at Troy. Jalen Green had 15.5 at JMU. Trey Moore, 14 at UTSA. A lot of these guys were not. Dallas Turner ended up having 10 last year. James Pearce was 16th with his 9.5. So I don't know. I think it really just comes down to how far Tennessee goes in the postseason. If Tennessee is able to run the gauntlet and play in at least 2 extra postseason games, maybe if they're hosting, that Tennessee finds their way into the CFP and they're hosting, I think they're going to win a home playoff game. I feel pretty good about that. And then you're looking at 15, 16 games maybe for James Pearce. And I don't know. I just, it's going to be something I'm monitoring week to week, is like what Pearce, how close he gets to the all-time record. Because I think it's going to be a fun storyline to monitor. I don't think I'm not going to say James Pearce is getting 33 career sacks or even tying it. But do I think Pearce pushes for 30 and is second all time? Is that a good bet that James Pearce is second all time for Tennessee in sacks? I think it's. I would maybe.
Derek Barnett broke it by like 1 sack, didn't he?
What do you mean? Derek Barnett had 33.
Yeah.
What second?
Didn't Reggie White have 32? I think.
Oh, that's right. Reggie White did have 32.
So no, I do not think he's going to get second. I don't think.
Your fact or fiction should have been he gets to 30.
Yeah.
We can revise
And
it
still
to 30.
Still
Do you think he gets to 30?
No, but I wouldn't have completely called you out for it being absurd.
I don't think he gets to 25.
25? You don't think he gets to 25?
He's at 11.5 right now, right? I think he has like a 12
and a half right
sack
now.
season. I mean, and I will say a big part of this too is, to me, I mean, you use like the Derek Barnett thing, or not the Derek Barnett, the Tyler Barron, like another guy stealing sacks from him. I mean, I really wouldn't worry about that. What Tyler Barron had like 6 sacks last year, 5 sacks last year. I almost go the opposite way. I think it behooves James Pearce's ability to get sacks if somebody steps up and is a stud on the other side, and then he can't just be completely game planned to take him away. I mean, that would be my worry of him not getting a ton of sacks, because just the way the teams are going to slide protections to try to take him out of games.
Look, I'll say this. And I'm glad we're talking about James Pearce, but I am more worried that Pearce has an underwhelming season for what expectations are right now than he has an awesome season. Like, there's just so much hype around him. Top 3 pick in these mocks. He kind of came out of nowhere last year, and he had just some huge games, but it never really felt like he was just. I know he wrecked the Virginia game, and he was great in some others, but I don't know. I just have my doubts as that he can be just the best edge rusher, no doubt about it, in the SEC.
I don't know. I mean, well, there's 2 parts to this too with James Pearce, which is I think Tennessee needs him to be better, even better than what he saw a year ago. Because to Ryan's point, there's going to be more attention to him. There's going to be a lot more pressure on James Pearce. Like, they have a year of tape on James Pearce.
Exactly.
But Joshua Josephs, by all accounts, this summer and spring has completely changed his look. He looks like somebody who's going to step up in year 3. He stepped up. It was ahead of Pearce 2 years ago in the rotation. Like, I think there's a lot of potential there. Caleb Herring in year 2. I think there's a lot of potential with Caleb Herring. You also have Jordan Ross, who looks way older than a freshman coming in. Like, Jordan Ross already looks the part. So, like, maybe a couple of years ago with the depth at the Leo spot, I'd be a little bit more concerned if James Pearce isn't able to live up to the hype. But I think Tennessee's pretty set. Like, when you look at position rooms around the Vols right now, the least of my worries, you can make the case is Leo, just because I think they're going to be able to rotate with the most amount of talent and pass rush talent, especially, that they've ever had in the Heupel era. Like, I think they're just going to be a revolving door of dudes who get after the quarterback. And if Pearce is not able to build off that, or has a quote-unquote down year, is not as dominant as we all think, I think Tennessee's pass rush could still be a lot better than what we saw last year, just because I think there's just so many options, especially on third down. Like, the pass rush packages are going to be they're going to be good. I think Tennessee is going to be, I mean, they led, I think, college football last year with TFLs. Like, I think they were second in the conference in sacks a season ago. Like, they're going to be right there. Like, I think Tennessee is going to continue to get after the quarterback, and I think Pearce is going to be the headliner, but I'm not as worried about what happens if he doesn't live up to the hype, because I just think there's so many options behind him that are going to be solid too.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually something I kind of posed in my practice takeaways on Monday, and it's kind of to your point, Chase. I think there's the only time I can ever think about it besides this year at the Leo spot would have been last year at running back, where I'm like, Tennessee has too many good players. Where it's like, it's obviously you can't have too many good players, but it's like finding playing time for everybody is the only two position groups I can think of in Heupel's tenure, and certainly a long time. Tennessee certainly never had that under Pruitt or probably Butch to that point. But where it's like they got so many guys, I'm not sure how they figure this out. And that's why I've kind of even wondered, is Josh Joseph's so much bigger? Like, is he capable of playing a little bit of the strong side defensive ends? But I mean, the pass rush packages are certainly going to be fun. And again, that's where I say I think it would do a lot for probably his sack numbers, maybe not his overall effectiveness numbers, but his sack numbers if some of those guys step up and have big seasons and take a little bit of a weight off his shoulders.
Yeah. Well, either way, like we all said, it's going to be a fun year to monitor Pearce, but it's also just going to be fun to see how many different dudes just are just electric at the Leo spot for Tennessee. And some unfortunate news over the weekend, Jourdan Thomas, who was looking like he was going to be the starter at the star position going into this year, he goes down with a season-ending injury. Just brutal blow because he's just not been able to stay healthy to this point in his Tennessee tenure. He'll still, I believe, have 2 years of eligibility going into next year because he'll be able to redshirt, so he'll still have 2 more years to get back and to right the ship here a little bit. But unfortunate news, and we talk about like where they're deep. An area where Tennessee is not deep is at star and in the back end of the secondary. I think corner, you could still sell me on them. Maybe not as big of an issue if they have an injury there. I think it's safety and star is the two where you're like, you just really can't afford these kind of injuries. And Brian, I'll pose it to you first here. What does the Jourdan Thomas injury mean for Tennessee? Is it one of those things where if you're looking for a silver lining, now you're going to force Boo Carter to get a bunch of first-team reps when there aren't actual games happening, and he gets to really run with the ones and get a lot more reps? Is an opportunity to kind of mix and match where like Will Brooks maybe slides over, or you move, like there's just options. Like, is John Slaughter, where does John Slaughter fit in? Like Christian Harrison, there's opportunities here to move some guys around to make this all work. But if you're looking for a silver lining for Tennessee fans and maybe even the coaching staff, it's that, look, it sucks, especially for Jourdan Thomas, but happening now, you're going to be able to really figure out what you have behind him and remedy this with about a month before your first game. I don't know. I go back and forth on it. It sucks for Thomas, and I think it's still very up in the air what they decide to do in the back end now.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks for the team as a whole, I think. And I mean, that's what you said, it's the silver lining. I would say, I think, if anyone other than Boo Carter is starting, I think to me, Christian Charles is the other guy that I would watch out for.
Yeah, Christian Charles too.
Yeah,
who Banks called it the X Factor, right? Was an X Factor? Is that what I heard last week? So, I mean, he could very well factor in and be the starting star because he's played corner and safety to this point his Tennessee tenure. He's been all over the place.
He has, and I'm glad you said that because this is my thing with Boo Carter. I don't know if you Sharpie him in as like the starting star for game one right now, but when you talk about how thin Tennessee is in the secondary, especially at safety, a little bit less at corner, and the fact that Christian Charles can move around and play those positions, it just feels at some point he's going to have to move. If he starts the season and he's the starting star, it feels like at some point an injury is going to happen and he's going to move, and Boo Carter's going to have to slide into that spot. So, I would be trying to get him as many first team reps and just reps in general as possible for that very reason. And I think that's, almost where I think losing Jourdan Thomas is the biggest blow, is he had that versatility too. Not that he could play corner, but he could play safety. I would have felt just as good about Jourdan Thomas starting at safety this season as I would Andre Turrentine, and probably more confident than Jacoby Thomas. So to me, it's a blow from that standpoint. Just the fact that he can play multiple spots and in really a whole defensive backfield, but especially when you look at the safety star bodies that are kind of unproven guys, Thomas felt like one that was just maybe a little bit more solid, and played a little bit more football and been pretty good when he had played.
Yeah, the reps is something that was big for Thomas, just the experience, and having been in the program a couple of years. Of course, Boo Carter, a true freshman. How's that going to work if he is the starting star to begin the season? But yeah, depth is the biggest thing here, I think, just because it's not like Thomas was going to be just an elite star. I mean, he's a very good option. Don't get me wrong, but the depth overall at safety now is the worst of any position on Tennessee's defense, if not the whole team. So that's what you look to here, and how it all shakes out will be. It's probably the most intriguing storyline the rest of the way through camp, I'd imagine. Just how Tim Banks sorts out the 3 starting safeties and what it looks like. As I said, I guess I would imagine Carter gets the nod week 1. It makes the most sense, but we'll just have to see how it all plays out.
Has Tennessee started a true freshman to this point? Because he'll be the only starter true freshman this year if he ends up being the starter. Like, I don't recall it. Heupel and Banks.
Not in the Heupel era. I don't believe so. No.
Right? This is unprecedented waters if they go down the Boo Carter rabbit hole as a true freshman. And like we all said, like, he's obviously super talented. And you looked at it where special teams was where we thought we were going to immediately see Boo Carter pop, is like on punt returns. Like, if Death, Taxes, and Mike Eckler are getting the most out of his special teams, like, Boo Carter, I've been most excited about just seeing him in punt returns. Like, I just think he's going to be electric, and like, he fits that D. Williams, Velus Jones model where I just think he's going to be dangerous with the ball in his hands early and often. But now it's like, how does that change the special teams approach? Is that something they have to consider? It's like, can we have Boo Carter back there? Because we now really need Boo Carter healthy. Can we risk him on punt returns now because he might be starting? Like, that's something I wonder, because D. Williams, you didn't really have to worry about that the last 2 years. D. Williams was not a factor in the secondary. Boo Carter is a starter potentially. Like, I wonder how much that changes Eckler and Tennessee's thinking in terms of how they utilize Boo Carter on special teams, because that's where I think a lot of us thought he was going to make the most immediate impact as a true freshman, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that felt like a given, no matter what his role is going to be defensively. And it is an interesting thought to pose that maybe you don't feel like you can take that risk with him now. Kind of feel like at present you still can. Maybe they see it differently, but you're, an injury here or there away from feeling like you probably can't risk it.
Ryan, do you feel like it's Boo or Christian Charles at star?
I feel like those are the most likely guys. Maybe Christian Harrison is a third. I would be surprised if it's someone other than them.
Christian Charles is so interesting because, I mean, when Tennessee was, pretty depleted in Heupel's first year, he was pretty exciting, I believe, as a true freshman in 21.
Yeah.
This guy who's played every position almost for Tennessee, it feels like, and he's just dealt with injuries all the time. So now that he's healthy, maybe he's the ultimate sleeper for this defense in that secondary, is to finally living up to that potential he had 3 years ago now and being a real-time player for Tennessee. I don't think it'd necessarily be surprising if he becomes a starter back there all season long.
He started at safety as a true freshman at Missouri, Heupel's first SEC win. And that's the game he got hurt in and didn't really play much again the rest of that season. I never really got the corner thing with him. He just always seemed to be more natural at safety, which is.
You think it's because they were just worse at corner?
Yeah, probably. But at the same time, it's like they were that good at safety, and they just had that.
Yeah, but they just had experienced guys.
I mean, they were down that South Carolina game. It was Brandon Turnage on the outside. They were down in 2022 in the corner spot. They've been thin. Yeah, we were doing some walk-ons. Wright was getting in there a little bit. Like, it was.
Yeah, I think corner has been worse than safety so far until this year.
Yeah, because, I mean, Jalen McCullough led the team in snaps last year. Wesley Walker was healthy mostly. And Tamarion McDonald, I guarantee you, Tamarion McDonald only missed the last 2 games. I mean, those 3 gobbled up a crazy amount of snaps the last 2 years. And I think that's one of the other parts with Jourdan is, like, I think Jourdan was going to be better than Tamarion. Like, I think Tamarion was solid, but I think Jourdan was a potential upgrade at that star spot this year. And it just... they don't have a lot of options. Like, it's kind of one of those things where I think you feel okay if Christian Charles, like, I think that's the best case scenario, right? Is Christian Charles holds it down and that allows Boo Carter to ease into it. Maybe you rotate a little bit more than Banks is accustomed to, but, like, that's probably the best case scenario is Charles wins this job over the next 3 weeks, and then Boo Carter is able to still be a factor, but not just be thrown to the wolves right out of the gate here.
Yeah, knowing Heupel and how, like you said, they've used true freshmen so far, it almost feels smart to bank on Charles starting week 1 because of being a more experienced guy.
But you got to have him healthy. Like, he's just someone else. Like,
yeah,
I mean, Tennessee, we wondered in the offseason of, like, how much would it matter to Marion, Wesley Walker, I mean, Jalen McCullough, you couldn't do anything about because he was off to the NFL, but like Walker and McDonald hitting the portal. Danico Slaughter was sneaky someone where you're like, that, because I mean, he's going to start at Arkansas. Brandon Turnage is going to start at Ole Miss. But I mean, you look at Danico where it's like, that's probably one where, I don't know. I think he was solid when he was able to be healthy. He was hurt a lot last year and he had some nagging stuff. So that kind of stunk because I thought he was going to be a solid CB. He was great in that Kentucky game, if I remember correctly, 2 years ago. Yeah, he had
Everyone
the hit.
remembers that.
Yeah, like Danico would have been nice. Like I understand like the other ones, but like that would have been cool. Like to not have that much turnover. Like somebody like Danico to come back would have been, I think, ideal. But it's hindsight's 2020 here.
I mean, yeah. Danico and Turnage, is that doing a lot? I mean,
I'm not necessarily as Turnage, but I still was pro Danico. I think Danico's a good player.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a fine player. I'd rather have Ricky Gibson and Jermon McCoy as the starting corners than him, personally. But I mean, he's a guy that's a little more versatile too, and could potentially definitely could slide in.
Because I think he's going to start at safety for Arkansas this year.
Yeah, safety is where they recruited him at. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not paying attention. Is Brandon Turnage really going to start at Ole Miss this year? Number 6 team in the country?
Yeah.
Trey Harris.
Let me go sell my Ole Miss stock.
I mean, Brandon Turnage.
Come on, man.
I feel like been in college for a really long time. Brandon Turnage has been around because I mean he came in from Bama. But yeah, no. I look at it in terms of Tennessee is just, they're going to be thin, man. Like at that spot, you need Christian Charles to be healthy. Maybe the guy we haven't mentioned, Caleb Beasley, maybe he factors in, like 4-star kid. And actually, maybe he has a good fall camp here, and he becomes more of a factor than we had previously expected. Because I think he's going to be a good player too. And where does he factor in? Does Jordan Matthews have some versatility? Because that's the other part of this. Is Tennessee has shown that they are more than happy to move guys around in the secondary. So just because you think a guy's going to be a corner, like if they need to move guys around, Tim Banks and Willie Martinez will move guys around. So if they don't feel good at, like they're like, Boo's ready for this, if they have to move, I mean, probably not Ricky Gibson or Jamon McCoy, but if they have to move Jordan Matthews or they have to move Jalen McMurray, the Temple transfer.
That's the one I'd say to watch.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if one of those guys gets moved to the star spot temporarily until Boo's ready. Like they're going to move it. There's going to be some movement, is my guess. That's something we've learned through 3 years of the hype bowl era here, is there will be some movement in the secondary of guys playing different spots until they find the right combination.
Yeah, McMurray to me is the one to watch, and is another guy I should throw in. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts. I mean, he's been hurt early in camp, so obviously that's kind of a question mark, but to me, it feels like he's the fourth corner, and he started some games both at corner and at safety last year for Temple. So versatility was kind of one of the things that was mentioned when he committed to Tennessee back in the winter.
There you go. Next up here, position outlook spotlight. Speaking of corner, when you look at that room, Jack Foster, what do you like most about the room coming into this year? How will it evolve based on what we've seen from the previous years with Willie Martinez's unit? Who's the new face that you think comes on the most in 2024? And who's your biggest question mark, or your just biggest question mark about the CBs this year for Tennessee?
All right, so I like the room this year. I think it has a lot more upside than in years past. I think Ricky Gibson can potentially pick up where Kamal Hadden left off as being almost kind of a true lockdown corner for Tennessee and being that guy at the position. And Jermon McCoy, I think you have to like that addition for Tennessee's defense. One of the probably, without really thinking too hard about it, probably the biggest land for Tennessee's defense out of the portal. So I think the upside of those two guys gives the cornerback room a lot more optimism than in years past. And another thing too is we talk about rotation in the secondary. They've done that so much just because everyone kind of felt like they were on the same talent level these past 3 years. Maybe this year, those two corners feel a little bit separated from the pack, and you're going to know who Tennessee's riding with each and every week. It's going to be those two guys. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If there's no injuries, of course. Those are the two guys Tennessee's going to live and die with at corner, potentially, if they hit. And I think that's going to be a good thing for Tennessee if they can have that. And like I said, it just makes the secondary better as a whole. You said question as well for the room. I guess it's just who is that third guy. I know we talked a little bit about it last week about Jordan Matthews, and we've mentioned him today so far. He feels like the third corner. Was a big recruit up there with Ricky Gibson as two pretty big lands at corner a couple of years ago. Can he take a step in his redshirt freshman season and flash and be that third corner that Tennessee could potentially rely on when they're rotating? And then new face, I guess I would just give the nod to Jermon McCoy, coming from Oregon State, just being a dude for Tennessee. It's the easy answer here.
And I've said this before, Ryan. I know you're like the Nico part of it, but the one who, if I could pick one guy to have back for Tennessee from last year's room, it'd be Gabe Jeudy-Lally. He was so solid all season long, and he wouldn't have that like starter expectation where you're like, you got to run with Ricky and Jermod out of the gate. But just that base, like he was such a high floor guy. Like he was just solid all year long. Gabe Jeudy-Lally was just such a sneaky great 1-year addition in the portal for Willie Martinez in this group. Like if there's one guy I wish we had one more year with to kind of get this thing through, because I think Caleb Beasley would be a factor. And these guys a lot of talented guys will be juniors and a lot older. This will be, I think, a growing in a good way secondary. But if you just had one more gap year of Gabe Jeudy-Lally to see this through, he's the one that I wish that Tennessee got one more year with. Do you feel the same?
In the cornerback room, yes. I would go the guy you've talked about a lot. Is Wesley Walker in the secondary as a whole. To me, he'd be the one, because I just feel better about the corner spot than I do the safety spot. I just don't feel very good about where Tennessee's at safety. And I'd probably say Gabe Jeudy-Lally was a better player than Wesley Walker was last year. Pretty similar. I mean, in the same boat, but I just look at need. And I do think Gabe Jeudy-Lally was really underrated and was just a very solid piece. And, kind of to the original question, I'll try to make it brief, but the analogy I've been making about it all, I've probably made it on here. I know I made it on the RTI podcast where, in 2022, it felt like Tennessee's first to third team corners, and goodness knows they had to use about all of them because they had so many injuries. It just didn't feel like the gap was very big. It felt like first starters, third team, guys are all about the same. And this is kind of what Jack was saying a minute ago. To me, it feels like, all right, if Tennessee gets to their third team corners this year, holy crap, they're in a bunch of trouble. But it feels like those starters, could definitely be better. And it feels like to where in 22 season, if a corner got hurt, it was like, all right, no big deal. Who cares? This season, if one of the corners gets hurt, it's like, that's a big blow. And largely, I think that's kind of a good thing, because it says that the talent level, at least starting, is better.
Well, you also just didn't think about it as much until the South Carolina game. Like that whole season, like really, it wasn't until South Carolina that the cornerback depth was just like, oh, we can't win this game for a multitude of reasons. But corner was one of the ones that stood out where like, this is but rough. I remember going back through the PFF grades after that game, and just, it was.
Chase, what touchdown drive did you actually begin to think that Tennessee was going to lose that game? When did you?
Know what's crazy? I mean, we'll never know with Hendon going down, which sucked. But
yeah,
I just never thought, like, I'm talking like mid fourth quarter. I was still like,
man,
I don't know. Like
by halftime, I didn't think Tennessee was going to win. They were just getting so
halftime.
Good. Yeah,
I was definitely not there at halftime. That's a little early. That you thought Tennessee was on. What was the halftime score? It wasn't even that bad.
Maybe after first South Carolina touchdown in the third quarter, which came pretty early.
I don't know. Tennessee was moving the ball these. Like Tennessee was moving the ball.
They were.
I don't know.
But South Carolina was. I mean, Spencer Rattler's Patrick Mahomes that game. It was unreal.
That was one of the best all-time quarterback
performances. It was 35-24 at halftime.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find who scored first. And Tennessee scored the first touchdown in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Made it 35-31, and then South Carolina scored the next 4 touchdowns.
When did Hendon go down? Wasn't it at the beginning of the fourth?
It was early fourth. Tennessee, I think, was already down. They would have been down 49-31 when that happened, because
it was
the next touchdown drive was 4-play 17-yard drive. I will say, I'm in the middle, y'all. It wasn't at halftime when I thought Tennessee wasn't going to win, but this whole we'll never know. Tennessee was not winning that game if Hendon Hooker didn't get hurt.
I don't know. I'll ride for Hendon Hooker until the end of time. Like Hendon Hooker coming back from, Alabama, he only needed 2 passes to get down in the field goal range.
Hendon Hooker might have scored a touchdown every single drive he was in. That might have happened. Tennessee was down 3 possessions, and they hadn't gotten the stop all night.
I guess it was just a law of averages. I was like, I think that was one of those things too, where I'm like, they're gonna eventually get a stop, right? You just keep looking. You're like, that meme, the Star Wars meme, like they're gonna get a stop, right? They're going to get a stop, right? The Padme one, where just
yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Tennessee's going to get a stop, and they just did not. But yeah, that's like one of the things that's lost in the ether with that game is that, like, Tennessee also moved the ball with ease. Like South Carolina was getting diced to pieces. It wasn't like I remember that opening drive where South Carolina goes and they're celebrating, and then like Tennessee immediately, like it was like 3 or 4 plays, and
4 plays, 75 yards, 31-yard touchdown run for Jabari Small.
Yeah, like
big Cedric Tillman game. That was his last big game.
And I don't think he was supposed to play, right? Didn't Cedric that was kind of
South Carolina?
No, that was after. Yeah, no, you're right.
That was a gutsy performance from Cedric too to play in that game.
Yeah,
I don't remember whether he was supposed to play or not. Let's see what he 9 for 81 and 2 touchdowns. Big Squirrel White game, 5 for 96 for freshman Squirrel White. I've blocked out so much of that game in my memory.
Milton and Squirrel. That's when it was born.
Do we ever see the orange helmets again? Are they gone for forever?
No, unfortunately, I think we see them again.
Do you think we see them this year, Ryan? Do you know something? Do we see them this
year?
I
don't know something. I just think we're going to see them again.
I think we're going to see them with black jerseys. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to do the orange helmets with black jerseys.
I'm not down with that.
I'm not saying I'm for it. I just think that's the way they bring it back is a home game.
Allow me to... That would look terrible. That would look so bad. Maybe they get black helmet stickers for it.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Allow me to old man take this. And there's no bigger old man when it comes to Tennessee uniforms than I am.
Says the guy with the corduroy sports hat on.
Jack.
I was helping your case. You said old man take. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Tennessee has put out some video, really more before fall camp. I don't think they've put out any recently, of like the players playing the new EA college football game against one another, as both as Tennessee. Very funny video where James Pearce is getting mad at how good James Pearce is in the game because he can't run offense because James Pearce keeps derailing things. Some of these uniform combinations that these players are putting together, abomination. I mean, if Tennessee wore some of these uniform combinations in real games, they would need to bomb Neyland Stadium and never let football be played there ever again. Not with people.
Talk about a T.
Not with people in it, obviously. I just mean the program should be disbanded because some of them are unbelievable. All right,
give us an example.
Yeah, I don't know what they've done. Like, what are the combos?
I believe there's been orange helmets, black jerseys, orange pants. I've seen. There's, I think, there was all orange, which I guess isn't. I mean, it looks terrible, but I guess isn't that bad. And then I think the one that truly got me was there was an orange helmets, black pants, white jerseys. I think was the one that was just.
They're just trolling at this point.
I
have a friend who does that. I have a friend every time we play Madden, he'll just alternate the uniforms to make them the ugliest possible. Maybe that's what that person would think.
It's a good tactic to win Madden games, honestly.
Yeah. It's really fun that he's like the Packers and it's like the 1920 stuff with like the current pants. Like, what is going on here?
Switching gears here a little bit. Season review series continues on here with Tennessee baseball. Dylan Dreiling, who may have been my favorite player, like looking back on like this season, most consistent, the most trusted fall batter, I think throughout the whole year, you could say was probably Dylan Dreiling. That you felt like outside of like the obvious two, I should do the caveat with Simo and Blake Burke, like out of the obvious two at 1-2.
Yeah, no doubt.
But he deserves a lot of credit for just, I mean, obviously you can make the case he had the most important hit this season for Tennessee, and we'll talk about that in a second against Florida State. But Jack, you're all over this question when it comes to Dylan Dreiling and the season. Was he the most underrated Vol baseball player this season? What was his best attribute that he brought to the team? And what's your favorite moment from Dylan Dreiling this year?
You know, undoubtedly, Dylan Dreiling was the most underrated player on this team before the College World Series. And I still think he probably takes the cake as the most underrated player. But he did get some flowers in Omaha. He had the walk-off against FSU. No one will forget that.
Yeah.
He won College World Series MVP. That's something that can't be forgotten. It's in the history books. So I think maybe when it all comes, like when you just look at everything and how everything finished, Aaron Combs may be the most underrated player. But Dylan Dreiling, offensively, yes. And throughout the regular season, regional supers, SEC tournament, 100%. My favorite Dylan Dreiling moment, it's the biggest moment. You talk about he had the biggest hit of the season. I think he had the biggest 2 hits of Tennessee season. And the number 1 for me is against Texas A&M in game 2. And I feel like it's a hit that flies under the radar a little bit. It's his 2-run homer there in the 7th inning to put Tennessee up 2-1. SEMO worked a leadoff walk. Texas A&M had changed pitchers. Cortez had exited the game in the 6th, who had been giving Tennessee a lot of fits. Wasn't necessarily the most dominant during the game, Cortez was, but he was doing really well for A&M. And then in the 7th, Dreiling's able to put Tennessee on top with that 2-run jack to score him and SEMO. Burke had stranded the bases loaded earlier in the game. Stark had grounded into an inning-ending double play. It looked like the season was going to end for Tennessee and that they were going to get swept in the CWS finals. But Dreiling, as he did all season, said, no, sir, I'm putting this team on my back and I'm winning the game for us. He did it against Georgia in the regular season. Probably the most exciting moment of the regular season was his grand slam in game 2 against Georgia in Knoxville. He did it against Florida State. He did it here. He did it so many other times too in the middle of games that you just forget about. But this homer in the top of the 7th against A&M, Tennessee ends up winning the game 4-1. I know Stark had a homer late too that people will remember, but that Dreiling homer was the most important hit of the game. And I think of Tennessee season because they're done after that game. I think A&M wins if Dreiling doesn't homer there in the 7th.
That's a good point. And Ryan didn't even want him starting in left. He was worried about his defensive limitations, and he wanted to.
Ryan finally came around on Dylan Dreiling. I'll give him that. But
finally came around. What are we talking about?
It was one of those where it was like we're talking like late May, and he's like, I don't know, and I was like,
no, it wasn't that bad. No,
wasn't. I don't even know what you're talking. I know Chase is trolling. What are you talking about, Jack? I was Dylan Dreiling starting left fielder from the data season.
No. I'm not talking about the left fielder thing. No, I'm not talking about the left fielder thing. I'm just talking about acknowledging Dylan Dreiling as one of the best players on the team. Like, it did take you a little bit.
Malarkey.
Nah.
Malarkey.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even believe this is ridiculous.
He would have been outside of your top 4 in late March for sure.
Oh, 100%. And I went into the year. Dylan Dreiling was in my top 3. I've been on the Dylan Dreiling hive. I've called him quiet Drew Gilbert.
I don't even know.
Hold on. I have been all in on the Dylan Dreiling thing.
This is the most ridiculous gaslighting I've ever seen. This is a PR masterclass by Chase right now.
Yes, thank you. Bye, Chase.
I don't know what to tell you.
A little bit by Jack too. Not really PR. I just don't understand the slander that Jack's throwing at me.
I'm not trying. Okay,
we can just all on this podcast and come to like the thing we can 100% come to agreement on is that it went me first, Jack second, Ryan third in terms of believing in Dylan Dreiling being one of the Tennessee best baseball players this season. Like I think that's the order.
Yeah. Maybe. I feel like I didn't talk baseball enough with Chase early in the season to really know if I can confidently agree there because y'all talked so much basketball on the pod.
I've been very, 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 very like Ryan. I was a Dylan Dreiling early guy, and Dylan Dreiling, the one where Ryan deserves his flowers. Cal Stark
and
Hunter Inslee,
big Hunter Inslee defender,
big Hunter Inslee guy
for sure,
and Cal Stark. But I think I get to run with the Dylan Dreiling take. The Dylan Dreiling take was spot on. I thought he'd be one of Tennessee's best players going this year.
Yeah, no, I think you said that. To me, I just feel like everyone that paid attention to the team and that had said that too. Like to me, the Dylan Dreiling stuff, maybe how good of a season he had was certainly a surprise.
Well, I think a lot of people thought Reese Chapman was going to have the year that Dylan Dreiling had before the season started because he was picked when you looked at.
That paid attention that thought that.
Well, I'm just saying, I remember, I think Eric Kane, friend of the program, had Reese Chapman as his breakout guy before the year. And I mean, I think a lot of people, and I think Reese Chapman's going to be really good going into next year. I think he's going to have a great year for Tennessee. But I think it was just like Dylan Dreiling, I think was overlooked. 'Cause I think a lot of people also thought Kavaris Tears was going to be good. I think they thought the power was going to be there, and if he could stay healthy, he was going to be it. And I just think Dreiling was kind of the forgotten one there. I think they were like, Dreiling will be solid, but they weren't thinking special. Like Dylan Dreiling was a special player this year, and he played himself out of coming back for a year. Like he was so good. I mean, how high and how meteoric his rise was huge.
Yeah,
like,
he was never
huge.
coming back.
I'm just saying, like, he left no doubt. Like, he and Tears, like, left no doubt that they're not coming back. Like, that's how good their years they were. But I think Dreiling even had a better year than KT.
He was special, and I don't think anybody anticipated that. And I think this is something Jack and I said on our podcast at the end of the season, kind of going back and listening to some of the stuff from our preview pod. Was like, Kavaris Tears and Dylan Dreiling were the guys that, going into the year, right, they're going to be everyday starters somewhere, and they're going to be good. How good are they going to be? And they, it was like we felt like they're going to be good players, and they exceeded any sort of expectations we could have for them. Both of them, and Dreiling was the better player. So, I mean, I completely agree, or at least the better hitter. I completely agree there that as good as people thought Dreiling was going to be, you thought he was going to be good, and he, like you said, he was special.
The silent assassin.
A silent assassin.
I think you asked me part of the question I didn't really answer, but what did he do best? His best attribute? Clutch gene. 100%. It was unmatched. Like I said,
I would just say he was
Tennessee
just impossible to strike out, it seemed like. Dreiling was just, he had such a good eye, and like he just worked counts so well. Like Dylan Dreiling was just, he had that Jared Dickey side to him where he was just, he made every at bat a pain for the opposing pitcher. Like I trusted him more than just about anybody to go long in an at bat if he needed to.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
Just as, rest my case here, but as far as best attribute, something that I don't know if Tennessee will have again in the near future, because most individuals don't have the clutch gene Dylan.
I don't know. They're back to back with Gilbert and Dreiling here. I don't know who's next in the pipeline, but maybe it's Reese.
Yeah, I think Dreiling had it, because you saw Dreiling even as in his freshman year with the home run against Vanderbilt, and he was just so good in pinch hit opportunities. Going back to the original question and Jack talking about the biggest hits of the season or his biggest moments of the season. I mean, I thought Jack hit the nail on the head. The A&M game, that's by far game 2, biggest hit of the season. I mean, it was excruciating for Tennessee. I mean, they had so many base runners that game, and they could not get anybody in, and it felt like torture. And then for him to hit just a no doubter over the bullpen in right field, and all of a sudden Tennessee led. Like a 1-run deficit felt so big in that game, and just boom, snap of the fingers, Tennessee has the lead. I completely agree. And I wasn't at the game, so it wasn't one of my favorites of the season, but what Jack said about the Georgia game, I think was one of the biggest moments of the season. I think we both had it like number 2 or 3, maybe, Jack, in our postseason pod as the biggest moments of the non-postseason moments of the season. And I think, and the one other one I'll throw in there was game 2 at Kentucky. He went 3 for 5, hit 2 home runs in that game. And, that was to me the series where I went from thinking, Tennessee's got a good team, has a lot of flaws, to thinking, all right, this is definitely, is this an Omaha team too? I think this is definitely an Omaha team. Maybe they can do more. And Aaron Combs, what he did that weekend was a big part of that too. And that all those general thoughts makes me think this team to me was a little bit of the flip Tennessee 22 team, where you look back at this team now and like just looking at the numbers and like looking at the wins, it's like, yeah, this team's got a case for the best SEC team of all time. And you just forget that the first half of SEC play, it was very rocky. Like they were good. There was no doubt they were good, but they had a
match every weekend.
Yeah, rubber match every weekend, and not against a ton of teams that ended up being, great. I mean, good teams. It's the SEC. There's so many good teams, but not just elite teams.
They lost to Auburn.
Into where the second half of the SEC play, they were just so dominant. And to me, that's kind of the opposite of 22, where I think, they were obviously got to the incredible tear. They were so good the first half of SEC play. And they only lost to one series, so you didn't really think about it. But you look back in hindsight, there were kind of some chinks in the armor for Tennessee 22 to back half of SEC play. They weren't nearly as dominant. And again, not all of it was against teams that were just like elite in the SEC too. So a lot of ramblings there, but in a lot of ways, I think two teams you at different times, people have talked about the best, in the SEC history or whatever. 22 and 24 Tennessee baseball teams were kind of flip-flopped.
Well, you also think about the regional, and maybe Tennessee had an easier regional this year than they did in 22. Campbell was super feisty. But it took Tennessee didn't put away Georgia Tech and Campbell all that easily. They were hard-fought games. And in this year's regional, I mean, Tennessee blasted Indiana and Southern Miss. Wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So those are no doubters. And then they had the walk in the Supers for all intents and purposes. I know Evansville got a game, but there was very, very little doubt that Evansville was going to beat Tennessee that weekend. So a little bit easier road there, but yeah,
I mean,
the
they
regional,
still
I
gave a
think,
little bit
is
of trouble. It was like the pressure was on. We overlook it now, but there
I know, but
the pressure was on Tennessee in Game 3. It was one of those where it's easy to forget. I think Ryan and I were on this podcast a little nervous, where it was like, it's not ideal. Like you know, this is like a make or break moment for Tennessee based on what happened 2 years ago in the Supers, getting upset. Like the Evansville thing, like the worst seed in the tournament, and just I don't know. There was a lot of nerves because those Evansville. I was telling a buddy, like I don't know if y'all remember, the Evansville fans were the like most confident, like loud, small school fan base.
They're playing with house money.
Well, like I remember I went, I was running an errand in Market Square like that Sunday morning before Game 3, and they were all over Market Square, and they were like chanting, and yet like they were like, "What's up? Like we're here. Like like it was kind of wild. Like I never would have thought the Evansville fan base is like, what's up? This is our city now. We're running this. Like we've got y'all on the ropes. We got you right where we want you." I don't know. Like the Evansville fan base, completely shocking, but I respected it. Like they were in here, like awesome. We're not scared. I mean, they lost, but hey, you know.
Ninth inning Game 2, I think will be a very sneaky. No one will ever think of it. Tennessee lost the game, but I think really changed that series and just did, even for me, and I was still the same way. It felt like there were some nerves that Tennessee could lose, and Tennessee certainly still had all the pressure. To me, that relieved a lot. It felt like Tennessee just loosened up as a team. They made Evansville, who didn't have a ton of pitching depth, use one of their best arms in that ninth inning to get out of it. They'd been lifeless in like the 7th and 8th inning offensively after Evansville had kind of taken control of the game. And just for them it felt like they loosened up, and then they came out the next day and just, from the jump, we're all over them.
Ryan Schumpert, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Plenty of fall camp coverage. It's kind of the name of the game right now, getting closer and closer. Off day on Tuesday, so we'll have normal coverage, but not fall camp stuff. And then rest of the week rolls on. Friday night, Tennessee has their first scrimmage inside Neyland Stadium, so we'll talk to Josh Heupel at a nice early 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll have complete coverage of that, and everything you need to know as we get closer and closer to kickoff.
There you go. Jack Foster, what about you over at Omaha Productions this week?
Yeah, this week's SV Pods, Stanford Steve was back on the show, so it was fun. Them two breaking down the Olympics, some more college football 25 talk, a couple of week 1 look-aheads for the college football season. We had a great show on Always College Football today. This was released Monday on examining the different 10-2 cases for each big player in the conference, like looking at what Kansas State's schedule in the Big 12. If they go 10-2, how's that different than, say, Tennessee going 10-2? There is a lot of contrasts from conference to conference. And then Mina Kimes show now twice a week, doing more than just division breakdowns, getting ready for the NFL season. So more preseason this week. Couldn't be happier.
There you go. Jack Foster, Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, and I will talk to y'all next week.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.